Welcome back to Consider Life. As always, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, comment in the comments section. That really helps us on YouTube. Today, I want to talk about how hell is everything we've always wanted. What I mean by that is that some people think, those who are atheistic or agnostic, they think that if we could just get away from this idea of God, then we would be left alone to pursue this sort of secular utopia. Well, today I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive on the philosophy side of things, just because this channel is dedicated to just sort of the way I think about things, and sometimes I think deep thoughts along these philosophical categories. And so if that's not your cup of tea, then go ahead and jump off now.
How do you take your tea?
Well, usually I take it right back to the counter because someone's made a horrible mistake. But when in Rome, right?
Yeah, it's horrible. No, thank you.
But I will say this. I was giving a talk on the philosophy of science one time, and it wasn't an academic conference. It was more of a general conference. And at the end of the talk, I had a guy come up to me and said, "My friends and I didn't know exactly what you were talking about, but we knew that something important was being discussed." And so if that's you, maybe stick around, and even if you don't understand everything that I'm saying, you may at least feel the weight of some of these categories as I'm presenting them. So what do I mean by hell is something that we've always wanted? I'm assuming that that most of us on any given day have thought, you know, if God would just leave me alone to live my life as I saw fit, I would be a lot happier. I've had those moments in my walk of faith where the Holy Spirit was pressing in on me in terms of righteousness or forgiveness or something like that. And I just thought, just leave me alone. But actually, I want to walk through some of the metaphysical and philosophical ramifications of this idea of the absence of God, because this is what we mean by hell. What we mean by hell is the complete absence of God, not in his causal power, but in terms of the way in which the human experiences reality. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to dive into the deep, deep end of things and then start moving more toward the shallow. So I want to talk about existentialism, and then I want to talk about final causality, and then I want to talk about the notion of justice. So we're going to cover those three things. We're going to start with the deep end of the metaphysics, and we're going to move back toward ethics, which is maybe a little more approachable for most people. And to get the categories of metaphysics on the table, I want to read through a quote from an article by a guy named Joseph Owens. So we'll start there. Owens says this, and this is in the middle of an article on the philosophical elements of individuation. He says this: "A little reflection will show at once what this existential synthesizing effects, that is, this existential bringing things together. In the accidental order, it makes into a single unit a human person and the qualities of tallness and musical accomplishment. They become one real existent, namely the tall musician. There is no reason in human nature, that is, what it means to be human, as in essence, why that particular person should be a musician or be tall. Human nature is found in other persons without those qualities. There is no essential bond uniting them. That is, there's no bond in the essence. The bond is existential, insofar as they are brought together by a real existence in one person. Correspondingly, there is no reason in the essence of a person why his or her form, the soul, should be actuating the particular matter of which the body is constituted at the moment. Different matter keeps coming and going through with the anabolism and catabolism of nutrition, yet the soul remains the same. There is no essential reason either in the form or the matter why this particular form should be in this particular matter at a given instant. The reason is existential. The two are united in the existence that they are actually enjoying at the time. The existence makes them a unit." Now, again, before I get all the word salad comments in the commentary, this is a fairly nuanced view of existential Thomism. It's not even the kind of existentialism that you might be met with in a Sartre or a Kierkegaard or a Heidegger, right? So I understand if people are a little bit lost by the verbiage. I have a video on Philosophy 101 where I sort of explain many of these categories of substance and accidents. But here it's just important to note this, that in the philosophy of nature for Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, that every concrete particular thing, every human, every dog, every giraffe, is made up of form and matter. And these are metaphysical principles in what we call the essential order. Matter is informed by form, form is individuated by matter, and so the one composite concrete particular is a composition of form and matter. And what Owens is pointing out here is that as fundamental as those metaphysical elements are, they are not the most fundamental metaphysical principle in a given existent thing. In a given existent concrete particular thing, there is an entire other order, the order of existence. And it's this existential bond that makes this person an actual ontological unit. There's no essential bond between matter and form or substance and accidents. And he picks tall and musical as these accidents of the substance or the essence of being human, human nature. So what I would say is this. In Aquinas' philosophical theology, his theology proper, one of the things that he says is that God is ipsum esse subsistens. That is, God is the totality of the act of being subsistently. His substance is the totality of the act of being, or of existence. So God is infinite being. And this matches up with what we read in Exodus 3, where God reveals himself to Moses as I am that I am, right? This repetition of the being verb as a window, as a revelation into the actual metaphysics of the divine, where God is just pure actuality. He's pure being. So take these two elements, that God is pure being. He's infinite, unconstrained being. He's infinite existence, right? And that the role of existence as a metaphysical principle for the individual existent is to bond the individual existent together as an ontological unit. It's a fundamental principle of individuation for the individual, right? Now, expand that to the entire whole of nature. All of the concrete particulars that make up the universe. The universe is a unity in diversity. And what I would submit to you is this. If we don't have God, right? If we want to eschew the notion of God, especially in this existential vein, what we lose is any sufficient reason for anything to be unified at all. And so the universe becomes a universe of solely diversity. It becomes existentially diverse with nothing making it a universe at all. So that's the first point. The first point is that without God making all of reality a unified reality, there is no unified reality, right? We are locked into this isolated existence. And I would say that that is hellish in its nature. Now, I would also say this on a more personal note. If you find yourself more and more disconnected from the world around you, perhaps that's an indicator that you are too far from God. Because one of the things that I've experienced is that as I get closer to God, I feel like I become more and more attuned to nature itself. When my wife and I were going through our premarital counseling, if you've seen this pyramid where there's Jesus and there's the husband and wife at the vertices of a triangle, the commentary is this. As you each individually get closer to Jesus, you simultaneously get closer to one another, right? Well, that's true in marriage, but also it's true just purely as a human existing in the natural world. And that is, as we get closer to God, we become closer to the author of all things. And so we actually draw closer to the world of the animals and plants and ocean and sun and moon and stars, right? There's this peace that comes with growing closer to our place in the natural order. And without God, I just don't see how that happens. I know I know there are Eastern philosophies, but I think they give a superficial and temporary feeling of oneness that it's unsustainable because it's metaphysically ungrounded. The second thing that Aquinas has in his general philosophy, but his philosophy of nature, and then I'm going to drag it into a theological context, is this notion of final causality, that things are moving toward an end related to their nature. And this is what grounds sort of Aristotelian virtues theory. It grounds our natural law ethics, that humans are a certain kind of thing. And as that kind of thing, there are some actions, behaviors, relationships that cause a flourishing of human nature. And there are other things that are deleterious or they detract from human nature. So a life of violence or deception, right? These things detract from human nature and human relationships, right? But if there is no God, then there is no genuine ultimate cause. There's no ultimate end. And that is at the core of the notion of hope, is that we are on our way. I did a video called the Theological Virtues, where Josef Pieper talks about hope as the sojourners, the travelers' virtue, because human life is an existence from birth to death, and in between we are on our way. And one of the things that sustains us in that on the way-ness about human existence is hope. And one of the things about hope is that it's pointing to an end, a good end. And without God, it's hard to imagine. This is where atheistic moral nihilism comes in, or existential nihilism, where you don't really think that there is an ultimate purpose or value. And I know there are debates over that, and I'm familiar with those, but I just think that the best explanation of why humans believe that they are progressing toward a good end is grounded in the notion of God. And this is this element of final causality. So if that's the case, if our sense of hope is rooted in this being on the way towards some final end that is good for us, then the absence of that would be hopelessness. And a lot of people, I think, today struggle with this hopelessness because in the absence of a strong belief in God, there is no real ground for believing that things are moving toward some good end. And then picking up on that last point, it brings us to this notion of justice, this transcendental justice. When we think about justice, it doesn't have to be philosophically too overwhelming or robust. We have a notion of fairness sort of built into our being, right? In whatever community you're in, either an atheistic community or a community of faith, there's still this pervasive notion of justice or fair play, at least. So that's the final thing that I think just goes away without a robust idea of God. And that is the idea of a transcendent justice. Because without there being some transcendent justice, if we're just evolved animals making our way in whatever socio-political construct we find ourselves in history, then there is no such thing as justice, not in this transcendent way. All there is power and control. And I said that without God, hell is everything we've always wanted. If we don't want God, then we don't have transcendent justice. And what we're left with is a will to power, this sort of Nietzschean will to power, which is what pervades this hellish culture. I've got this video on spiritual warfare as a war between cultures. And this hellish culture very much is typified by these elements of power and control. And the reason is, absent God, which is what a hellish culture is, absent God, there is no value for justice or fair play or giving to each person according to what they deserve, right? Which is Aristotle's notion of justice. So that's it for this video. I just, like I said, wanted to come on here and share some more of my philosophical musings about what life without God is like. And it really does, what emerges are these hellish values, these hellish elements: complete isolation, hopelessness, and a complete lack of justice with only power and control remaining. So next time I want to talk about why children are not communal property, right? It's something else I was reflecting on actually watching the movie School of Rock last week. Why children are not communal property. We'll talk about that next time.